Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. Kazakhstan has marked 10 years of its enhanced partnership with the European Union this week as the country plays a growing role in energy and critical raw materials for the EU. At the same time, the country continues to develop its strategic alliance with Russia. In short, regional dynamics are evolving with the EU-Armenia partnership as well. Meeting set to take place on Tuesday. To discuss all these major developments and their implications, we're joined now by Richard Giragosian, founding director of the Regional Studies Center. Good to have you back on TVP World.
Good morning, Sascha.
Richard, let's begin with this wrap-up of the Cooperation Council between the EU and Kazakhstan. So what were your main takeaways from this? How significant is this to politics, to trade, to energy?
I would say very significant. In fact, this is the 22nd such council meeting. What's different this time, however, is Kazakhstan is ever more a regional leader with enhanced strategic significance. Part of it is the broader context. Russia's weakness and distraction from its failed invasion of Ukraine has also forged a new opportunity and opening for Central Asian states, as well as Kazakhstan. But it's also important to note the European Union is the leading trade partner for Kazakhstan. That is despite the Kazakh membership in the Russian-dominated Eurasian Economic Union. And at the same time, Kazakhstan also benefits now from the start of a visa liberalization process, something that Armenia has just undergone as a benefit from deepening ties with the EU. But finally, it's China that bears further scrutiny. In the vacuum of Russian distraction, we do see Kazakhstan and Central Asian ties developing much faster with China than Russia. At the same time, the EU is now punching above her weight as a key partner for Kazakhstan.
Mm-hmm. You said an interesting point there that the EU is punching above its weight. I mean, this is often seen as a huge major trading bloc. I mean, more and more inroads into, as you highlighted there, into Kazakhstan relations. I mean, this matters as well, looking at energy, looking at batteries, raw materials, critical components that Europe needs. But at the same time, how reliable of a partner is Kazakhstan in all this? We know that recently they signed that new strategic alliance, or let's say renewed strategic alliance with Russia. So with that in play here, how reliable is Kazakhstan? How reliable are those relations between Astana and Brussels and all major European capitals?
Well, that's a very good point. In fact, as we've seen in the recent parliamentary elections in neighboring Kyrgyzstan, the weakness of democracy throughout the Central Asian region is still an obstacle and an impediment, both to reliability as well as development. Nevertheless, I do think from a European Union perspective, Kazakhstan is a pivotal state in terms of connectivity. The so-called middle corridor, this new east-west axis that has also benefited from an opening between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But I do think you're right. The absence of real legitimacy and weak democratic credentials does tend to question longer-term relations between Brussels and Kazakhstan.
Mm-hmm. Interesting you mentioned also connectivity here in terms of also this Trans-Caspian transport hub and all of these different connectivities. I mean, one thing you said that China is also in the picture here. I mean, they're also looking at alternatives in terms of connecting to Europe. So is China in play here more as a competitor with Europe? Do you see China here as someone that could be worked with also to circumvent Russia? Is this another angle here? How do you see China and Europe and the connectivity issue with Kazakhstan?
Well, there are two very interesting new developments. First is, in the wake of Russia's failed invasion of Ukraine, China is the dominant force in terms of dealing with Russia. And in many ways, China's the only strategic victor from the situation in Ukraine. At the same time, a second observation is this is more of a Chinese let's say, exploitation of a dangerous power vacuum where Russian power and position is much weaker. The EU is still further remote, and Central Asia is looking east as much as it's looking west. Interestingly, the other regional power is Iran, which is distracted by its own challenges with Israel. But another third regional power is, of course, Turkey. And we do expect Turkey to finally move closer to its long-held aspirations of being more of a patron state for the fellow Turkic states of Central Asia. So what this means is the EU is going to face new challenges, not necessarily from Russia, but in jockeying for position with China and even Turkey in Central Asia.
All right, speaking of jockeying there for power influence, I'm curious also to get your insights. I mean, looking at Kazakhstan again, looking at this connection between, as you said, increasingly important relationship with the European Union, at the same time that strategic alliance with Russia, there's a lot of pressure, this dual track pressure here. Where is this ultimately going to end up with? And then also that wider question, where does that leave other of those influential partners in the region?
Well, that's a very difficult question, but in terms of more of a predictive analysis, we should expect Kazakhstan and other Central Asian states to play both sides against each other. In other words, to try to leverage this new triad of a weak Russia, China, European Union. Time, this is against the backdrop of U.S. neglect, the absence of reliability and coherence coming from Washington. And it adds yet another complicated variable in Central Asia's future security and development. So I do think, although the region as a whole is now much more important to the EU, there is a differentiation when we talk about the West, because the U.S. is no longer a relevant actor.
I also want to get onto the region as well. We have, starting today in Brussels, also the meeting between the EU and Armenia. I mean, that's also a relationship that's been forging forward closer and closer. So what kind of lessons can Armenia learn from Kazakhstan, or what do you expect from this meeting concluding later today?
Well, I do understand that this is an Armenian move ever closer to Europe. It's an important escalation or deepening of the relationship in a very positive way as Armenia moves into an election year. But the parallel with Kazakhstan is interesting. Both Armenia and Kazakhstan are members of the Eurasian Economic Union, a rival and contradictory trade bloc to the European Union. Nevertheless, the EU is the largest trade partner with Kazakhstan. For Armenia, unfortunately, it's Russia that is the largest trading partner and investor in Armenia. And this is a fundamental obstacle as Armenia seeks to move closer to Europe. Nevertheless, both Kazakhstan and Armenia have an enhanced partnership short of membership or candidacy. And what Armenia can benefit from is learning lessons from Kazakhstan, how they are better managing and juggling the reliance on EU trade while also being within the Russian orbit in the Eurasian Economic Union. And for small Armenia, post-war diplomacy now offers a degree of unprecedented opportunity.
Okay, so it's a complicated mix. I want to add more to this mix. One thing that we've left out a little bit, Richard, is talk of the United States in all this. I mean, there was a recent visit in a format, I believe it's a C5+1. Kazakhstan secured a lot of major deals with U.S. firms. How much is the United States in play here as well in that region? What can we expect from that? I mean, they have also their own strategic interests, so putting the United States in play with Kazakhstan and the wider region.
Well, I am and I remain skeptical over or concerning the sustainability of U.S. interest and engagement in Central Asia. This is very different than, say, post 9/11, where there were basing considerations for Afghanistan. Moreover, even since the Biden administration, we've seen a U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and much less of prioritization of this region. Under the rather unpredictable nature of the Trump administration, I do think the one thing that will benefit Central Asian countries is the Trump administration's dropping of human rights and democracy as key metrics or benchmarks of U.S. engagement. That doesn't bode well for the region or for democracy, but Trump prefers authoritarian partners over genuine democracies. So there will be an interesting contrast where some Central Asian authorities will benefit from the Trump administration's approach of seeing Central Asia as a real estate deal, if you will, rather than a strategic priority.
But at the same time, I think with that Kazakhstan-U.S. Format, I think it was very much about rare earths. I mean, that was probably one of the main, let's say, reasons why Trump was interested, right?
Yeah, in fact, would go even further. This is just the recent demonstration of the Trump administration's transactional approach to foreign policy. It's commodity-based, it's profit-driven, it's very much let's make a deal, rather than promoting democracy abroad or economic development. Nevertheless, I do think Trump is expected to go further and faster in this region in a race to beat China to critical rare earth material, as well as other key assets, including perhaps energy.
Okay, so we know, thanks so much here. All those nuances, a complicated region, but all the major powers interested in having, as you said, their position there. Look, thanks so much. Always a pleasure. Richard Giragosian there. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Sascha.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here. There's much more coming up on TVP World, so don't go away.